Hi guys, welcome back to episode 4 of my crochet podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, then I hope you enjoy what I have to say. My name is Clarissabeth. I am crochetcakes on Instagram and on Ravelry. You can follow me on either social media platform if you wish. Just a heads up, this week's episode is going to be slightly different than my previous 3 episodes. I do have a bit of channel admin this week before we start with the crafty crochet goodness. And my first bit of channel admin is that I created a Ravelry group for the Crochet Cakes podcast, and you can search in the groups tab on Ravelry and find it under the Crochet Cakes podcast. I don't really have a lot of threads at the moment. There is a Clarissa Explains It All thread where you can ask me any question if you're choosing, and I will do my best to answer it on Ravelry, and maybe I'll include a little segment of the podcast dedicated to answering the questions that you guys have. The other bit of channel admin is that this week I will be introducing 2 new segments to the podcast, but my regular What Am I Hooked On segment will not be present. And that is because these past few weeks I feel that my crafting has been all over the place. As I mentioned in my previous episode, I had a week's vacation coming up, which I took during the 4th of July weekend. And during that week, I had hoped to turn it into a successful craftcation, but it was actually more of a bakecation, and my crafting, as I said, was all over the place. I did start the Sassy Librarian blouse as I had hoped I would, but I didn't finish sewing it. And I did do a little bit of crocheting and knitting, but it wasn't enough progress on either to actually include it in a segment of the podcast. Enough of the channel admin, and let's get off to the crafty crochet goodness. So the first thing I want to talk to you about this week is finished objects. And it is my Woodland Realm fat bottomed bag. It is finally a finished object. And as I discussed previously, I was having issues deciding what handles to choose for my bag. I didn't know if I wanted to crochet handles, if I wanted to make a crochet braid and then have those be the handles, if I wanted to buy wooden handles, if I wanted to do fabric handles. Finally, just decided to go with a burlap handle. This burlap handle is actually a ribbon that I bought, and I cut it in half and I folded it, top stitched it, and then I glued in the ends so they wouldn't fray. But it felt very rough and coarse. So after doing that, I decided that I was going to steal some of the ribbon my mom bought and just glue it on the tough glued corners, and actually glued it and sewed it and just attached it, and I think it provides a nice decoration. Speaking of decorations, I decorated my bag with some metal brass charms. I've got some leaves, birds, smaller leaves. This is a little lantern that really reminded me of when they visit the Lady Galadriel's realm in the first Lord of the Rings movie. And these are just more birds and leaves. The birds, the lantern, I attached them kind of inserting a ribbon in the holes of the single crochet, and the ribbon that was left over, I attached these little green balls. And I'm very, very happy with how my fat bottom bag turned out. And if this is your first time tuning in, just a quick reminder, I did use the pattern. Well, I used 2 different patterns. One was from Wink, a creative being, and it was her Parisian bag, I believe, and the other one was the Marie Fat Bottom bag by Kathryn from Crafternoontreats. So this is my first finished object. Well, actually, it's my only finished object this week. The segment I wanted to introduce this week is called W.A.R. Why W.A.R? Because it is a work at rest, and these are projects that I started but just never finished, and I haven't worked on them, and if there's been progress, it's been so minute it can't even count as a work in progress. So the first one that I want to share with you is in this bag, and it is the cap sleeve top by Mary Jane Hall. It is a free pattern. It is a beautifully constructed blouse. It is very adorable. I loved the pattern when I was crocheting on it. I liked crocheting on it, but for some reason it never made it into my works in progress list, and this is all the progress I've made of As you can see, it's very varied. Here we have single crochets, then we have double crochets, then we do single and half double crochets to kind of tuck it around the bust area. Then it flares out with some more double crochets, and we finish with some treble crochets. So it is very simple construction, and you don't crochet in the round. You do it front and back, and then you kind of sew them together, and then you do your sleeves. So it provides for different sleeve ideas that you can attach, and different construction ideas as well. For example, if you don't want it to stretch so much in the bust area, then you just crochet under both loops instead of using the back loop only. I was using a f 3.75 millimeter crochet hook by Boy, and the yarn I was using was this lovely yarn from the Plymouth Yarn Company. It's their Sahara. There we go, you can see that better. And it is 40% linen, 40% bamboo, and 20% silk. So it is a very luxurious blend, and it's dreamy to crochet with. And I love that in some areas it's kind of fatter than others, almost reminds me a bit of hand spun. So this is one project that I really wish I could say was a work in progress, but I think one of the reasons that I abandoned it, or that it became a W.A.R project, is because I didn't feel I would ever use it. I do love the kind of empire waist style, but I wasn't sure if I would use it. So it just kind of sat around, and I think I crochet 1 or 2 rows every 5 months. So yeah, poor thing. I think it's gonna be sitting there for a while. The other project that I wanted to share with you guys is a rug. And this is a pattern that you can find in redheart.com. And it is a very fun, easy, fast crochet project because you crochet using 3 strands of bulky yarn and this plastic crochet hook, which is, I believe it's a Q 15 millimeter crochet hook. So it's a really fast, fun crochet. The reason this is a W.A.R project is because, let me just kind of like pull it up. Can you guys see how just lovely the rug is, and it's so squishy? The reason this is a W.A.R project was because I was using 3 strands of yarn held together, as I said. This is, I believe, Bernat in the color, by Bernat in the color Denim, and the gray and this lovely lime green are Lion Brand. I do not remember the exact colors or the style of Lion Brand that it was because I am horrible when it comes to keeping track of my ball bands. The reason this was a W.A.R project was because I ran out of my 3rd piece of yarn right here. So I thought, okay, I can continue with just 2 strands of yarn. Then when I was halfway finished, I ran out of my other strand of yarn, and I only had the blue strand of yarn to keep me going, and this is it right here. This is what I've left. So I just kind of abandoned it because I thought this last little shell was necessary. If you leave it like this, it just looks incomplete. So it's a war project, because I guess I could finish it if I do purchase more of this gray, because the green is a discontinued color, so I can't purchase that. But I could finish it with 2 strands. But until I do that, this is a war project. Another war project that I have, and this one, instead of being a work at rest, should be called the cemetery, because I really just want to bury it and never work on it again. And it is this table runner that I started crocheting for my mother a year ago, maybe, and I never ever kept working on it. And this is using Sheru Knitting's Octagon motif. And it's actually a very pretty octagon motif, and I guess the problem was that from the beginning I did it wrong, because not the octagon, the crochet on the octagon motif itself, it's just that I should have watched both videos that she had about her octagon motif, because she teaches you how to make it and then how to join it. I just watched how to make it, didn't watch how to join it, and of course you join it as you go. So before you even finish crocheting on it, you're supposed to join it to the other. And I just also really dislike working with fingering weight yarn. Using a 2.75 crochet hook is not my idea of fun. Even though I was using the Clover Amour, which is the little padded ones, but it was just, no, I'm just not, nope. I'm never gonna go back to this ever again. And I was about halfway done because I was supposed to do another row up. But enough about war. It is time to move on to the knitting experiment of my podcast, and I'm kind of excited to show you the knitting experiment this week because, excuse me, and I'm back. I cast on the second sock to my 5th time is the charm socks, and I cast these on Sunday the 3rd of July, I believe, and no, not Sunday the 3rd of July. I cast these on Sunday the 10th of July, and today is Saturday the 16th of July, and look at all that I have done. I have done a 2x2 cuff, then I did my 21 rows of stocking stitch, I knit my heel, did my heel turn, picked up my stitches, and I am now doing my gusset decreases. And I feel that I have been super snail knitting this week because I knit very slowly, as we've already discussed, but I feel like my snail knitting has sped up this week. I think it's mostly because this is a DK weight yarn and it's 3.25 millimeter needle, and it just, I feel like it zooms by and that I can knit any sock as long as it is in a DK weight and with 3.25 millimeter needles. Just as let me show you the original one I had knit. And if you are new to the podcast, the reason that I hadn't yet cast on the pair was because I felt that this wasn't really good sock yarn, because it doesn't, even though it has 20% nylon in it, it doesn't stretch as well as wool. This is a cotton silk nylon blend. But I wanted to have a pair for it, even if it's just socks that I sleep in or use to walk around the house. I wanted to cast this. And these are currently living in this little project bag that I sewed myself. This was my only finished object from my Craftcation, and my little metal bobbin is the zipper pull. I did it with the leftover lining from my Marie fat bottomed bag, some leftover fabric from the Sassy Librarian blouse that I'm sewing, and the lining is this fabric from hell. It was horrible. It got stuck in the machine 2 times and it was just not fun to sew with. But yeah, guys, that is it for my knitting experiment. I have not done any knitting on the opal socks, which are my Doom Bloom socks, and I haven't touched them at all in 2 weeks. So they're on their way to becoming a war project, but I'm gonna try my best to at least have a half-finished object at some point. And I forgot to mention, I was going to enter these in the Bakery Bears Summer of Socks knit along, and I'm at least gonna have 1 pair of socks finished. They're also doing a stack of socks, so if you knit up lots of socks, then you can just stack them up. You stack them up when you fold them, like so. Fold them, stack them up, measure your stack, and put a picture of that in their finished objects thread. The other new segment I wanted to talk to you guys about this week was my YouTube TV segment, and this will be a segment where I talk about podcasts that I'm enjoying. As I mentioned previously, I currently watch 3 podcasts. They are the Bakery Bears podcast, which is the first podcast I ever started watching because Claire from Bob Wilson 123 mentioned them a lot in her crochet tutorials, and from there I learned about the Crafternoontreats podcast hosted by Kathryn, and while I was on my way to watching other episodes from those podcasts, YouTube recommended Inside Number 23 podcast, which is hosted by Katie, and it is currently also one of my favorite podcasts because I just love the style of her podcasting, and I love that she's as obsessed with Harry Potter as I am. Her podcast is about knitting and sewing, as well as other crafting that she does. The Crafternoontreats podcast is a crochet podcast, and the Bakery Bears podcast, if you've never watched it, is also a knitting/history podcast, and they are hosted by Kay and Dan Jones. The other podcasts that I've been watching this week, these past few weeks, have been the Slip Knit podcast, which is a knitting podcast, and one of the things I love about it is, of course, the name Slip Knit. I just think it's a fun thing to say. And her videos are very short and sweet, and I think it's great because if you only have 15 minutes a day to dedicate to crafting, you can just put one of her videos on and have somebody entertaining in the background while you do your crafting. The other new to me podcast, I know many people have already watched it, is the Tiny Paper Foxes podcast, currently known as Handmade and Woolen. I would say I really admire how her podcast is always so clean cut, and her lighting is just fantastic, and she's seems like a really sweet person, so I also recommend you check out her podcasts. And if you have any other podcasts that you would like to recommend, please comment down below. I would love to find another crochet podcast, so if you have any suggestions on that, I'll create a Ravelry thread about favorite podcasts so we can recommend podcasts to each other and just hang out in this knitting/crocheting community. Another segment that I want to talk about this week was What's in the Making, and this is where I talk about future plans, future projects that I plan on crocheting or knitting, or maybe even sewing. This week I decided to talk about this. well, not the yarn, but the project that I want to make with the yarn. Although the yarn is lovely and squishy, and it is not itchy at all, and it's like a pillow. It is a pillow, guys. I have 6 of these lovely, what are they called? Wild yarns from the Plymouth Yarn Company. It is 49% acrylic, 25% alpaca, 25% wool, and 1% nylon. So it kind of looks like a braid of yarn. The reason I bought this was because I wanted to knit a pattern by Wool and the Gang. I don't remember the exact name of the pattern, so I will write it here. But I didn't want to spend more money on knitting needles because I spent a lot of money on yarn lately. And maybe I'll do a little yarny goodness segment in my next episode because the shipment hasn't arrived. But the reason I decided against making this pattern for now is because I was trying to participate in the 50 points for Gryffindor crafty scheme that was created by Katie from the Inside Number 23 podcast, and I've been failing miserably because I have been buying yarn, a significant amount of yarn, but I am of the idea that it is not such a bad thing to fail because I've restricted myself to only buying yarn that I have projects for. And it's been really hard because every time I just decide that I'm not buying any more yarn unless I have a project, unless I finish these 2 projects, I can't buy any more yarn. Craftsy or yarn.com send me an email update saying, hey, our clearance is an extra 20% off today and we've got awesome expensive yarn that is now ridiculously cheap. And I'm just like, okay, well, I should go check it out. And checking it out usually means literally checking out because my credit card will have participated in the checkout process of just looking. Yeah. Anyway, so I decided that since I have bought a significant amount of yarn lately, I was not going to purchase the knitting needles that I needed for this pattern. And so I decided, why can't I just recreate that pattern in crochet? Because the sweater pattern, it's a free pattern and they have video on YouTube, so I'm not giving anything away by commenting on it. You basically just knit stocking stitch back in the front and then you sew the sides and you add in your sleeves. So I decided, I was like, well, why don't I just try doing that in crochet, because you're basically making a little box that you're going to shape later on. So this is going to be my experiment, and I will be using the biggest crochet hook that I have, which is this 15mm one. I already did a little trial and I would need to do a chain of between 25 and 30 to get the length that I described in the pattern, because this will not be for me. This will be a gift, and I'm not mentioning who, because just in case they watch the podcast, I don't want them to know this will be a gift for them. But that is my what's in the making. And I never know how to end a podcast, guys, but I'm just gonna say we've reached the end of this week's podcast. It's I hope you've enjoyed the projects and you weren't too disappointed that there hasn't been any progress on the pineapple sweater or on my vintage granny square blanket, or that I haven't actually started another crochet project, because I'm feeling a bit sad about it as well. So I feel that this week's podcast has been a bit all over the place. So if you stuck with me this far, thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in and checking out my little corner of YouTube. If you like the video and you would like to see future videos that I upload, then please subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to come and check out the Ravelry group, Crochet Cakes podcast, and introduce yourself, and I would like to get to know you guys. And I will see you again in 2 weeks' time. Bye!